Hey guys, welcome to this new video. Today we're gonna talk about expatriates and doing business in Malaysia. To discuss about this subject, I invite Benjamin. He's been living there for a while. He has a good experience into doing business because he launched a startup. So we're gonna discuss about the challenges, the opportunities, as well everything you need to know about doing business and moving to Malaysia. Let's get started. Hi, Benjamin. I'm very happy to have you today to discuss about your entrepreneurship journey, relocating from France to Malaysia, as well as your entrepreneurship story behind the startup that you launched. So can you start by introducing us who you are and what you are doing in Malaysia?
Sure. First of all, thanks a lot, Guillaume, for having me in the podcast, webinar, video cast. It's a pleasure, and I really hope that it will be helpful to all who listen and tune in. In terms of a very quick introduction about myself and what led me to Malaysia. Actually, I came to Malaysia a little over 10 years ago, so it's already been some time. With a lot of different experiences. So for the story, I come from Rouen in France. I attended a business school there called Neoma Business School, which led me to work with PwC for a few years in France. PwC, which is, for those who don't know, a finance and accounting and consulting firm, basically. And as this experience was, I would say, generalist enough and opening a lot of possibilities, professionally speaking, I got the opportunity to join CMA CGM in Malaysia. CMA CGM, a huge container shipping, and actually today they are doing more and more things, coming from France, one of the top companies in the world. And after a few years there, when I learned how to manage teams, manage people, and so on, I spent a year in Singapore to do an MBA at INSEAD, and then came back to Malaysia, working in consulting with McKinsey, working in Lazada, which is a well-known e-commerce platform, the leading, if not almost the leading platform. And now this led me a few years ago, 3 years ago exactly, to start my own company called BrioHR, which I think we will talk a bit more about in the next few minutes.
Okay, cool again, Benjamin. Good introduction about yourself. So huge background, like especially in Malaysia, and then working in Big Four. So it's interesting that you have this background, and after this switch from kind of the corporate life to the entrepreneur life. Let's talk a little bit more about Malaysia first. When we had a call together, you told me that Malaysia is not a country that you will fall in love within a weekend. Can you develop a little bit that, like coming to Kuala Lumpur and then spending time in Malaysia? What did you basically fall in love?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, it's my experience, and it's also the experience that I heard countless times from friends who had spent a weekend in Malaysia and so on. So why that? Why is my opinion? Is that Malaysia, first, when you come from France, and let's say you don't have really Asian exposure, it's of course very different. As you can expect, it's very different from France. The roads out there sometimes seem a little bit broken. It's heavily skewed towards cars and not pedestrians. So you wonder where you can walk, and when you walk, you can't really find your way, and you have to walk in a broken sidewalks, kind of. But also the heat is super strong. So let's say if you come for a weekend and visit Kuala Lumpur, let's say, definitely it feels a bit, it's good, right? But it feels a bit, somewhere like not super comfortable. So that's why actually I've heard countless time and so on, like, oh, I spent a weekend in Kuala Lumpur, or actually I'm not really a super fan of Malaysia and so on. And honestly, I would agree, and I would understand that. But then, as you spend a bit more time in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur itself, but also when you visit, other amazing places in Malaysia, so you have a lot of diversity, you have a lot of amazing places. So you have some of the most beautiful islands in the world. We could talk about Redang, about Perhentian, about Tioman. I mean, all those are super beautiful white sand beach areas. You also have some, I would not say mountains, I would say hills, like the Cameron Islands with the tea plantations. So there you have a lot of fresh air. You see the landscape. So as you visit the country, you understand that it's a lot more to offer. It has a lot more to offer than Kuala Lumpur itself. And then back to Kuala Lumpur, when you spend some time there, you quickly realize that actually it's the perfect mix of Asian culture and like a Western culture, which helps you, sometimes get the comfort that you might need from time to time, like in terms of food, in terms of environment, and so on and so on. So as you discover a bit more about Malaysia, I really think that you fall in love with Malaysia. A lot of the people I met who stayed a bit actually ended up staying a lot more. But of course, a few people visiting over the weekend just told me, yeah, I'm not sure.
Actually, I've been to Malaysia a couple of times, obviously mostly spending time in Kuala Lumpur. But one time I really took like my backpack and travel. I remember going to Cameron Island. You mentioned it, and I really feel the mountain vibes. People were really taking things really slowly. I mean, life was very chill over there. And then I moved to Pangkor Island, so a very tiny island as well. I remember gathering with some Indian, and on the other side some Malay. And I feel also people like very welcoming, very warm, and then really looking into trying to know who you are and what are you coming to that tiny island. So I really enjoyed the vibe there. And then I ended up finalizing in Penang. So of course there I also see like the big city, like moving a lot with probably opportunities. So I kind of get the same feedback as you had. In terms of diversity, I think this is really similar to Vietnam. So you have like big cities when you can have like condominium, malls, etc. And then you have also more like local districts that you feel more maybe, going back on time and having something more authentic. So I guess, yeah, this is a good experience that people can have if they spend more than a weekend in Kuala Lumpur.
Definitely. And as you mentioned, diversity, so there is clearly the diversity in terms of the immediate environment, the city. You go a few kilometers away from Kuala Lumpur, you can already see some villages. You can actually even do some treks in the jungle, like 1 hour away from Kuala Lumpur. I mean, it's like huge diversity when you consider that in Kuala Lumpur, you also have a city center with some of the highest skyscrapers in the world and so on. And then you touched on it. There is, of course, the cultural diversity within Malaysia, meaning among Malaysians themselves, but also with a mix of foreigners from very diverse countries in and so on. So it makes a very multicultural environment. That's also why, you can really easily be discovering new things, but going back to your comfort zone when you want.
Interesting, Benjamin. We're going to talk a little bit more about that multicultural environment, and I'm curious on the business aspects and also on the personal. What's the impact it can have, like either in pros or cons? But we're going to go in a minute. But before that, can you maybe talk a little bit more about the business environment in Malaysia? I guess this is the same as Vietnam, so there is like growing GDP, the middle class population is raising. What are basically the top sectors that are currently booming in Malaysia?
Yeah, I would say that the top sectors currently booming in Malaysia are fairly similar to those of, I would say, countries in fast growth, right? Fast evolution. So I would say, of course, that e-commerce and logistics that kind of go hand in hand, right? Are booming in terms of having a lot of huge players, like Amazon, for example, in the I would say US and Europe and so on exists since more than 20 years. But here in Malaysia, the two leaders, I would say, of e-commerce would be like, for example, Lazada, who was created in 2012, if I'm not mistaken, and Shopee, who was created a few years later. And those two are huge today and represent some of the biggest companies in Malaysia, along with Grab, which is, for example, which is similar to Uber, with a mix of ride-hailing and also food delivery. So this I would say business to consumer sector is very booming. So e-commerce, logistics, And I would say, of course, this maybe is everywhere in the world, but tech is of course also taking a prominent step. First, because even those e-commerce and logistics providers, they are often hugely relying on tech. So, you know, it's not exclusive, it's not a different sector. But of course, you have a lot of fintech, again, a lot geared towards consumers, more than business to business. Like, for example, you know, the e-wallets to allow you to seamlessly pay with your phone in the supermarkets, or to pay online, your online purchases also very easy. So it's very booming across those sectors, and many more actually, but those I would say are the most visible.
Yeah, maybe probably similar as what we see in Thailand, in Indonesia. That's mostly the sector that are moving over there. Going back now to the question of the multiculturalism. So basically in Malaysia, you have the mix between Malay, Indian, and then Muslim people. And coming there, I remember, again, connecting to some Indian people living there, also visiting some mosque and having the person over there welcoming you and then explaining you how things work. What is your perspective about that, about being in that society that you will have maybe a Chinese temple, next to you will have a mosque, and next to you will have, it will be in an Indian district. What's your feedback about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so when you describe, you know, the Indian temple nearby, a mosque nearby, a Chinese temple, actually you can even add nearby a church. So it's really like you know, all religions and so on that are represented. And actually, it's really an eye opener. I really do think that this one is very unique to Malaysia. It's very famous for that actually. That the mindset here is not to say, if you are different, I accept it, but you should not show it too much. The mindset here is whatever, you know, like if you like that, if you do that, if it's your religion and so on, it's okay. You could live with that. You can be in the streets dressed in a traditional, you know, outfit from your culture, and I'm okay with it, even though I have a very different traditional outfit from my culture. So what's striking is the acceptance of the difference, like accepting each other no matter what you do and so on. So as you said, there are, I would say, three main groups of Malaysians. So that's an important point, right? They are all Malaysians, but you have the Malaysian Indians, the Malaysian Chinese, and of course the Malaysian Malay, who are sometimes referred to as Bumi Putra, so the people from the soil, whereas the other come from, you know, like 2, 3, 4 generations ago, who migrated to Malaysia. And this is prevalent in really the day-to-day life, personally, of course, like you have a Malay restaurant, a Chinese restaurant, an Indian restaurant, and a French restaurant actually sometimes. And also at work, where you have a lot of mixity, I would say, in the workplace. So that's really the approach and the mindset about difference, about cultural difference here is really striking, and something you're not really used to when you come, for example, from France.
Okay. And so on the business environment, like when you hire people who are maybe following a certain kind of group, I would say, is it easier for them to work with each other, or obviously will they prefer to work with people from the same groups? How is it? Is there, I mean, challenges into working in this multiculturalism environment?
I would say I never really felt challenges, like in terms of not being able to work together and so on, because in the end, there is still a common language. Like first, most of them will speak English. You know, like Malaysia is a very high rate of English proficiency, but they will also, for most, speak Malay. So they will all since they are kids, they are in this multicultural environment. So you know, they are all happy with that. And even though there might be some communities, of course, as you can imagine, you know, because you're maybe gathered around some of your special interests or particular interests and so on. At work, I've always seen it to be super easy for people from any background to interact with each other, including, of course, the French that I was when I first came into Malaysia, and a lot of other foreigners coming from different countries, be it, again, other countries of Asia, Europe, US, anywhere in the world. There is a practical thing that was funny that I discovered very quickly. Actually, is that you still should consciously, depending of course on your activity, but consciously make sure that you have representation from all, I would say, groups in your company, because when it comes to the religious festivals, be it again Indian, Chinese, Malay, usually you will have all people from that group away for like 1 week. So if you need to run operations, you better make sure that you have some backup in place and so on. So that's a practical, funny thing that you discover very quickly when you're confronted to that.
Yeah, I mean, in Vietnam, it will be different. You know, it will be more, you will hire the group, but finally they will all be the same somehow. Maybe you will still have a problem in terms of the hierarchy. So maybe some people who will be older than you will have to kind of put more effort when you want to talk with them, but we won't have this in Vietnam, basically. Now, talking more about how to set up a company as a foreigner. Can you tell us a little bit some rules, some lessons that you learn? Is it that easy to set up a company in Malaysia?
Yeah, it's actually fairly easy. So they are really pro business. It's actually fairly easy. So you have a few things when you want to create a company in Malaysia, you have to use the services of what is called the corporate secretary. It's not only in Malaysia, but it's maybe less something you're used to, and again coming from other countries. But so this corporate secretary will kind of handle everything, the registrations and so on for you. So actually, administratively, it becomes fairly easy. It's not necessarily super expensive. It depends, of course, of the corporate secretary that you choose, but you really have the full range of prices, services, brands, and so on. As a foreigner, you can actually very easily open a business as well, again, using the services of a corporate secretary. Then you just have a few criteria. I would say that, for example, you have to fulfill when you want to hire other expatriates, for instance. So paid up capital, for instance, if the company is 100% locally owned, meaning by Malaysians or a fully Malaysian owned company, then you will need something like 250,000 Malaysian ringgits, which is roughly $60,000 equivalent, right? Before, in paid up capital, before you can be eligible to hire expatriates. When you're a foreign owned company, then this goes up to double that. So 500,000 Malaysian ringgit, which is roughly $120,000. So you see, there are a few criteria that differentiate whether you are foreign owned or local owned and so on. But all in all, foreigners can operate in pretty much every sector, and it's fairly easy to set up the company here. Yeah. Then you have even some jurisdictions that are even more advantageous tax-wise. So this is more kind of the offshore. So I'm not familiar with this necessarily myself, but I know that people who might be interested in coming in Malaysia to do business might look at Labuan, for example, Labuan. So Labuan is a place where it makes it even easier to set up a company and so on. So it's fairly smooth for this.
Okay, so I guess, yeah, the government is pushing some areas with some incentive, like the tax, right, or corporate income tax reduction, to have maybe more foreign companies opening in a specific jurisdiction. You mentioned about the ratio between foreigner and Malay. What about the rule to get work permits as a foreigner? Is there specific things that we have to follow?
So it's actually a country where there are a lot of foreign workers, again, of very different, I would say, education levels, in very different work lines and so on. So you can really pretty much have a working visa. I would say, again, depending on the line you work in, depending on the salary you will have and so on, you have different types of visa. I would say if we think about expatriate visas, yes, you have a certain salary that you need to earn. This has been evolving over the past few months, so better to check very quickly what is the last rules and the last amount in place. Then you have some other categories of visa which are applicable to people who have spent already like 2-3 years in Malaysia. Same, you have some criteria for salary and so on, which then makes you kind of eligible for a 10-year visa. So if you stay the first few years and there are specific work permit that, again, usually your employer will ask for you, it's not individual, it's employer-based. After 2-3 years, if eligible, you can switch to that one. And then in this case, you are completely, you have your own visa attached to you, so you can change jobs easily and so on without having to take care too much or to worry too much about the visa anymore.
Now, basically, how do you see Malaysia as an entry point to enter Southeast Asian market? Do you think it could be one of the best countries for instance, yourself? You set up your main company and your headquarters in Kuala Lumpur, and you plan to expand in all Southeast Asia. Do you think Kuala Lumpur, especially, is a good place to enter?
Yeah, I do think it's an extremely good place to enter. So it happened that I was already in Kuala Lumpur for 7 years before I started BrioHR. So of course I had many other reasons why I wanted to start it in Kuala Lumpur. But my co-founder, for instance, Nabil, was at the time working in Singapore, and it was never a question that we would start in Kuala Lumpur and that he would come over to Kuala Lumpur to start. And a few reasons, but I think it's probably the country in the region which offers the best compromise in terms of infrastructure, availability of talents, English language proficiency, of course, cost, and even geographically, it's right at the center. It's right at the center of Southeast Asia. Within 2 hours, you can be everywhere for work. And if you say within 3 hours, I mean, of course, of flying, 3 hours of flying, then you can add all the best holidays destinations in the world, like, I don't know, Bali or these kind of destinations as well. So both for, and I strongly believe in the mix of professional and personal well-being. So for both aspects, I think it's the best compromise. You can have your kids there, and they will have an amazing environment to learn, to grow, and so on. And again, of course, back to business, the few criteria as I mentioned.
Vietnam is well known as a place, for instance, for tech as well, and for outsourcing companies. And then, I was curious about the position of Kuala Lumpur, especially in the region, like as an outsider, or even maybe as a country that more and more companies are targeting to set up their entities. Philippines is also well known because they have a lot of English-speaking people. But yeah, maybe Malaysia is kind of growing as well, and then more and more companies are choosing to put their headquarters over there and try to expand after to Asia.
It's the home base of a lot of regional headquarters for companies that traditionally might have gone to Singapore, but who try to make an arbitrage cost-wise, again, when they understand that life in Kuala Lumpur and in Malaysia is very good. And then compared to other countries, and of course, it's a matter of pros and cons, and there I'm not saying that one is better, one is bad. But you mentioned Philippines, for example, it's a bit more, outside in terms of the geographical south compared to Southeast Asia versus the central approach. So it really depends on what matters most, of course, to the company. But I've seen a lot of regional headquarters here, and more and more startups as well.
Okay, interesting, Benjamin. Thanks for your sharing today. Do you have a final word, or do you want to mention maybe something about what you are doing now on, and then the next upcoming plan for BrioHR?
Yeah, sure. First, again, thanks again for having me, and I'm happy to share my experience here. In terms of BrioHR, I didn't really intro it, but we are basically an all-in-one HR management software, so human resources management software, helping companies manage really all their employee life cycle from like recruitment, onboarding, all the way to payroll, leave management, performance management, and so on. So why I'm saying this as well is because it might be relevant to some of the audience if you are looking at Southeast Asia, Malaysia, but we cover other countries in the region. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to help and to make sure that you can still have some visibility over your resources and some efficiency and localization in terms of managing your local employees. And the plans for us, we are in a very good trajectory so far. So we just plan to still continue to do our best and be the leading HR software provider for Southeast Asia. That will take us some time, and it's a fun journey.
Okay, very good vision, Benjamin. I wish you the best for your expansion to all Southeast Asia. I will leave all the links below in the description. So if you want to reach Benjamin, feel free to go below in the description, and we'll have the link to check a little bit what BrioHR is providing. Thanks, Benjamin, for your time. Don't forget to leave us a comment below. Ask us your questions, what you think about our discussion today, and we can exchange with each other.
Thank you very much, Guillaume.
And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I'ma get it right. Dead on sight like